There were whispers long before there was proof. Not among humans but out there, across the void. Among species that had catalogued stars before Earth lit its first fire. They spoke in hushed frequencies about a strange anomaly from a death world called Terra. A world they labeled high-risk, unsuitable for colonization due to its volatile biosphere, fluctuating climates, apex predators, bacterial aggressiveness, and worst of all, the species that rose from it. Humans. They arrived at the galactic table late, yet with grace. They weren't conquerors, despite the expectation. No threats, no bluster. They came with diplomats, linguists, scientists. They offered technology that didn't rely on aggression but ingenuity. Terraforming bacteria, medical nanites, agricultural optimization. Tools of life, not war. The Council took note. A Deathworlder behaving like a pacifist? Curious. Other Deathworld species had always carried the stench of survivalism. They were loud, territorial, and burned out quickly. But the humans? Quiet. Cooperative. Strangely humble. The Treaty of Civility, signed millennia prior to reduce galactic conflicts, had long been an aspirational document, more symbolic than enforced. Yet humans adopted it immediately upon arrival. Eagerly. Almost too eagerly. Where other species negotiated exceptions or footnotes, humans accepted every clause without hesitation. That's when the murmurs began. Why would a species evolved on a hell planet bind itself so tightly? Why would apex predators wear collars without protest? The K-Cheltan theorized it was a bluff. The Yvethi suggested psychological damage. Perhaps humans feared themselves. The Drathkin whispered something more unsettling. The humans were not bound. They were holding back. There were details, oddities, incongruities that built a pattern. Human gravity tolerance exceeded most high-mass species, yet they never competed in strength exhibitions. Their soldiers were never seen in public delegations. Their AI systems were locked tighter than any other races despite supposedly being limited. And then there was their curious obsession with fiction. Stories filled with monsters, war, survival, told as entertainment. As if recalling muscle memory. But speculation was all it remained. The humans continued smiling, helping, blending in. They played the role of diplomat, fixer, peace-seeker. Some grew fond of them. Others simply forgot what planet they came from. Then came the records, leaked across dark data streams. Unverified at first, then proven real. Archival footage from the human past, long scrubbed from their official databases. Glimpses of a time before their entry into galactic society. Entire cities wiped out by kinetic weapons. Oceans poisoned. Planets scorched and rebuilt. Soldiers operating in environments most species wouldn't survive in for seconds. One clip showed a Terran battlefield commander giving orders calmly while his own arm was being cauterized mid-combat. Still, humans never discussed these things. Never confirmed or denied. That was another time, they would say. We are not that anymore. And for a while the galaxy accepted it. After all, the humans hadn't hurt anyone. Their colonies were open. Trade was fair. They provided aid where others sought profit. Their diplomats diffused conflicts faster than any bureaucrat had ever managed. But to the observant there was unease. Why were humans always so measured? Why did their civilian ships come standard with reinforced hulls and life support redundancy far beyond regulation? Why did they refuse to export military-grade equipment, while simultaneously never requesting any? They didn't posture because they didn't need to. They didn't escalate because they never had to. One ambassador from the Shydren Collective, after decades working with Terran counterparts, summarized it best in a confidential log. They wear peace like a garment, but it does not define them. It is a choice. One they make every day. That choice was what made them different. Most species found peace after exhaustion, after conquest, after their teeth had been dulled by history. Humanity, it seemed, had found peace at the height of its capability, just before entering the stars. And unlike others, they did not forget what they were. They simply kept it quiet. There was a saying passed among fringe intelligence operatives, often in jest, sometimes in fear. Asterisk, if you ever see a human stop smiling, you've already lost. Asterisk. It was funny. Until it wasn't. Until one day the smile did fade. But before that moment, before the galaxy understood what it had truly invited into its councils, its colonies, its homes, humanity played its part perfectly. Gentle, helpful, grateful to be included. No claws shown. No threats made. Only the faintest scent of something beneath the surface, like smoke from a fire that had not yet reached the treetop. And the galaxy, arrogant and complacent, mistook silence for weakness. It wouldn't make that mistake again. Velmari Prime was considered safe. A mid-tier colony world, strategically irrelevant, economically stable, and protected under multiple interstellar treaties. It housed embassies, research facilities, and a handful of Terran diplomats overseeing agricultural collaborations. No military presence. No defenses beyond standard orbital tracking and passive shield. It was a place for discussion, not war. When the Scourgeborn arrived, everything changed in 17 minutes. A splinter faction from the outer Perseid clusters, long exiled, technologically erratic but vicious, descended without warning. They breached orbit with scavenged stealth tech, disabled planetary comms in under a minute, and began systematic targeting of government centers, transport hubs, and data archives. It was efficient, violent, and entirely one-sided. Panic spread. Evacuation attempts failed. Defensive contingencies triggered but lacked any real teeth. Local security forces were overwhelmed within hours. Other species requested aid from the Galactic Senate, but response protocols delayed immediate action. Committees formed. Votes were scheduled. No action was taken. In the center of this unfolding chaos, 6 Terran diplomats remained calm. Eyewitness accounts from survivors described them walking through debris-littered corridors without visible concern. No shouting. No weaponry. Just quiet coordination. One of them sent a single encrypted message using a handheld relay built to function under hostile electromagnetic interference. The message was short, logged as 37 characters. 13 minutes later, the sky changed. 3 objects, small, fast, unannounced, entered Velmari's orbit. They emitted no IFF tags, no greetings, and no threat. The objects decelerated briefly before aligning themselves above 3 distinct locations: the enemy landing zone, the orbital relay the Scourgeborn used for communications, and the surface staging area. Each was obliterated simultaneously. Not damaged. Not repelled. Removed. The strikes were kinetic, using mass acceleration rather than energy-based delivery. No emissions, no explosive residue, no warning. The sound came after the event. Each impact was precise, leaving surrounding infrastructure untouched. Civilians in nearby zones survived without injury. The Scourgeborn did not. It was only after the debris had settled that Velmari Prime's communications were restored. The Terran diplomats made no statement. They assisted in medical triage, coordinated cleanup, and shared food supplies from their private stockpiles. Galactic Response Forces arrived 2 days later. They found order, silence, and 6 humans calmly sipping rehydrated coffee. Questions came fast. Who authorized the strike? What platform launched it? How did it bypass standard orbital tracking grids? The Terrans offered no answers. They submitted a standard diplomatic debrief, citing self-defense under Interstellar Clause 42 Delta regarding the protection of civilian consular staff. It contained no technical specifications, no timestamps, and no names. That's when the real unease began. Analysts scoured the impact data. The projectiles had entered the system on subrelativistic trajectories. They weren't launched from nearby vessels. They were already in motion from deep space, long before the attack had even begun. Some estimated the launch occurred over 12 days prior. The implications were immediate and staggering. Humanity hadn't reacted. They had anticipated. Ships were dispatched to investigate possible launch points. They found nothing. Not debris. Not heat signatures. Just silence. Theories bloomed and wilted within hours. Some suggested orbital platforms disguised as asteroid. Others believed in automated AIs waiting silently across key sectors of space, primed to act the moment a certain signal was received. The one undeniable truth: the humans had the capability. And they had chosen a surgical response. Not total destruction. Not vengeance. Correction. That was the word an Andrelin analyst used in a leaked Senate memo. This was not warfare. It was correction. The removal of error. The reaction among galactic powers varied. Some demanded transparency. Others grew quiet. A few attempted to probe Terran systems for signs of similar deployments. All probes were intercepted and returned, untouched, with no indication of when or how. From that point forward, no one questioned whether humanity had military power. The only question that remained was how much. Because nothing in the Terran diplomatic profiles suggested orbital kinetic capability with predictive targeting. Their navy was modest, officially. Their colonies lightly defended. No superweapons, no experimental tech disclosed. And yet, when Velmari Prime fell under threat, humanity didn't posture, didn't negotiate, didn't issue ultimatums. They acted. Fast. Clean. Without spectacle. They didn't ask permission. They didn't require validation. And they didn't explain afterward. The message was silent, but it echoed across every council chamber in the galaxy. Whatever image humanity projected, helpful, cooperative, restrained, it was not weakness. It was choice. And from that moment forward, everyone started watching them a little more closely. The incident on Velmari didn't just ripple through diplomatic channels. It tore through centuries of assumptions. What had been dismissed as exaggeration or ancient propaganda now demanded reevaluation. Archived theories once buried in fringe research circles resurfaced. Intelligence bureaus across the galaxy began compiling everything they'd overlooked, everything they'd disregarded, about the species from Terra. The first revelation came from declassified pre-contact footage unearthed by a Zentari historian. It showed a primitive Earth city, flattened by coordinated atmospheric firestorms launched by human-made craft. Survivors moved through radioactive zones with rudimentary protection, setting up aid stations, evacuating the injured, not because they were immune to harm, but because they did it anyway. Further footage showed battlefield behavior no non-augmented species could mimic. Soldiers hauling triple their weight through mud while under fire. Units continuing coordinated movements after sustaining catastrophic injuries. Audio logs revealed orders delivered with calm efficiency while being surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. Not bravado, function. It wasn't rage that fueled them. It was design. Multiple alien races began releasing fragments of their own encounters with early human exploratory probes and patrols. Records once suppressed for political reasons were now public. The Yulnari trade fleet incident was among the most disturbing. Pirates had intercepted a human convoy in deep space. The entire event lasted 9 minutes. None of the pirate ships remained. The human vessels never acknowledged distress. When the Yulnari arrived hours later, they found the convoy idle, systems nominal, transmitting only a polite warning. Region unstable. Recommend reroute. An Ilari xenopsychologist wrote a paper that was immediately classified. He outlined a trait unique to humans, adaptive aggression with empathic modulation. The species was capable of switching between compassionate cooperation and total emotional disengagement based entirely on context. Not schizophrenic. Not conflicted. Deliberate. He called it selective moral override. It explained their history. How a species capable of producing art that made other civilizations weep could also develop chemical weapons before establishing unified government. How they could terraform planets and simultaneously carry protocols for sterilizing entire biomes. neither state cancelled the other. Both coexisted. Digging deeper, alien analysts found traces of projects never officially acknowledged. Autonomous weapons buried in deep oceans. Genetic experiments spliced with extremophile DNA. Entire battalions trained for sub-zero, zero atmosphere, zero hope conditions, not as a last resort, but as standard procedure. Yet perhaps the most chilling discoveries came not from classified files but from cultural archive. Human literature revealed a race obsessed with worst-case scenarios. Fiction filled with extinction, invasion, betrayal, apocalypse. Simulated endlessly through stories, games, and media. They hadn't imagined peace. They'd imagined surviving the loss of it. Other species created to celebrate what they loved. Humans created to prepare for what they feared. The Drelkin Cultural Council issued a statement. We now understand that humanity does not suppress its nightmares. It trains with them. Allies who had once seen humans as harmless became cautious. Former rivals reconsidered their strategies. Trade routes shifted subtly away from Terran space. New security protocols were drafted under the euphemism of strategic realignment. And still, the humans said nothing. They didn't deny the stories. They didn't correct the data. They didn't retaliate for the surveillance. They simply carried on, attending diplomatic meetings, improving trade conditions, sharing research, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Small races, previously dismissive of Terran involvement in galactic politics, began offering unsolicited cooperation. The Veskari opened resource treaties they'd blocked for decades. The Anari, long isolationist, invited Terran engineers to upgrade their energy grids. Not out of fear of invasion, there had been no invasions. It was something else. A recognition that whatever the humans were, they weren't reckless. They weren't unpredictable. They were something worse, disciplined. It was the Drakari ambassador who finally said what others wouldn't. In an off-record meeting later leaked, the humans aren't hiding monsters. They've trained them, domesticated them, and given them names. And they keep them just behind the curtain. When asked why, he replied, because they believe peace is only real when you're strong enough to end it, and still choose not to. That sentence spread faster than any official broadcast. It redefined how the galaxy viewed them. Not as saviors. Not as conquerors. As a species that had once looked into the abyss, stepped into it, mapped its terrain, and then walked out of it with the lights off, just in case they ever needed to go back. The message was clear. Humanity was not what it appeared to be. It never had been. 3 colonies were struck at once. No warning, no negotiation. Coordinated attacks by a coalition of fringe empires emboldened by silence, misjudging restraint as weakness. The Terran colonies, Orsus, Havath, and Kirill, were not military targets. Agricultural, educational, civilian. Each one fell under assault within minutes. The attackers came fast, confident in surprise. They disabled satellites, jammed communications, and landed troops with overwhelming numbers. Local defenses barely had time to register the incursion before they were dismantled. Standard procedure assumed human evacuation or surrender. Instead, nothing happened. No distress calls. No formal retaliation. For 11 hours, Terran space remained quiet. Then Orsus went dark. Satellites from nearby systems captured the change. One moment, the planet's orbital patterns showed the attacker's fleet in geosynchronous orbit. The next, nothing. No debris. No movement. No signals. Just blank space. Then Havath. Then Kirill. Ships sent to investigate arrived cautiously, weapons primed. What they found was beyond comprehension. The colonies were intact. Not damaged. Not defended. Not rebuilt. Untouched. Agricultural systems still functioned. Energy grids ran smoothly. Civilian populations unharmed. The attacker fleets were gone, but not destroyed. The ships remained in place, floating, powered down. Not a scratch on them. No signs of battle. No trace of conflict. The interiors were empty. Entire crews gone. Not killed. Removed. Weapon systems disassembled, propulsion cores offline, control AI wiped clean. Like someone had opened the ships, extracted every element of threat, and left them there as a warning. Nothing had exploded. No force had been used that left mark. It was surgical, precise, absolute. Terran diplomats offered no explanation. They submitted a short broadcast to the Galactic Senate. The incursions have been neutralized. All colonies are secure. No further action is required. No retaliation followed. No counterstrike. No demands. But across the galaxy, alarm spread faster than any fleet could travel. The only indication of what had occurred came from a single encrypted stream traced to a former military moon near Sol. A facility presumed decommissioned decades earlier had activated briefly. No launch detected. No movements tracked. It simply blinked online for 97 seconds. Then off again. Analysts speculated. Autonomous systems? Prepositioned countermeasures? AI that had been sleeping for decades, perhaps centuries, awakened by a silent trigger? No one had an answer. What they did know was that 3 attacks failed instantly, without warning, without war. And that humanity had made no statement beyond confirming the outcome. It wasn't the power that terrified the observers. It was the control. No vengeance. No escalation. No demands for justice or reparations. They could have retaliated. They didn't. They could have destroyed nations. They chose to remove only the threat. No more, no less. That kind of restraint frightened everyone. Because power without control is dangerous. But power with absolute control is untouchable. In the aftermath, private meetings erupted across systems. Formerly bold factions canceled military expansions. Research into offensive AI was halted. Some empires opened immediate peace talks with Terran envoys. Not to beg, not to appease, but to understand. The phrase, "they didn't fight back. They corrected," became the whispered truth across every council. Human trade routes became more secure. Unasked for favors were extended. Neighboring systems shifted policies to align closer with Terran interests, without any formal agreements. Not because they were coerced, but because suddenly, the illusion of hierarchy had collapsed. It was now undeniable. The humans had removed their mask. But what made the revelation devastating wasn't what they did. It was what they still held back. They hadn't revealed ships. They hadn't deployed soldiers. No weapons were displayed. No fleets mobilized. Just absence of the threat, of the attackers, of resistance. And yet the message was deafening. We are capable. We are prepared. And we are finished pretending otherwise. This was not dominance asserted through fear. It was clarity delivered through demonstration. They were never hiding weakness. They had been withholding strength. And when the choice came, they acted not out of anger, but necessity. Not to punish, but to prevent. The weight of that realization shifted the political axis of the galaxy. Humanity was no longer seen as a cooperative species seeking relevance. They were recognized as what they had always been, a force with nothing to prove and no interest in theatrics. Only one conclusion could be drawn. The chains were never real. They were chosen. And now they had been set aside. The galaxy adjusted, quickly and without ceremony. Maps didn't change, borders weren't redrawn, but everything underneath shifted. Where once humanity had been another voice at the table, now it was the quiet center around which conversations orbited. Not by demand, not by decree, but by silent consensus. Small civilizations began aligning themselves with Terran initiatives, citing mutual benefit, though none dared suggest conditions. Former critics issued sudden endorsements, reinterpreting past disagreements as misunderstandings. Neutral races started offering cooperative pacts without prompting. One by one, unspoken barriers vanished. Not due to fear, but due to recognition. The change wasn't enforced. It was absorbed. Human diplomats didn't alter their tone. They didn't assert dominance, threaten force, or demand deference. They kept doing what they had always done, offering assistance, mediating conflicts, fostering trade. But now every offer carried weight. Not implied threat, understood consequence. Everyone knew what they were capable of. Everyone understood what they chose not to do. The unaligned worlds noticed it first. Their envoys reported the same pattern. Terrans never boasted. They never reminded anyone of what had happened. But their presence brought silence when they entered the room, respect when they spoke, and swift compliance when they made a request. Not out of obligation, but because no one wanted to test the line between patience and resolve. Political commentators stopped asking if humanity belonged in the upper echelons of galactic leadership. The new question was how long they had allowed everyone to believe they didn't. Historians updated their assessment. Strategic think tanks reclassified Earth origin assets as critical stabilizing forces. Cartographers began marking Terran-influenced sectors not with color, but with subtle glyphs that meant only one thing: do not interfere. But among the powerful, the truly old, the ones who had ruled for millennia, the lesson landed deeper. Because they understood what had happened wasn't a demonstration. It wasn't a show of strength. It was an unmasking. Humanity had always been this. The only thing that changed was the galaxy finally noticed. There were no parades, no declarations, no monuments erected to mark the moment. But something fundamental altered in interstellar memory. The events surrounding Velmari, Orsis, Havoth, and Kirill weren't labeled as battles. They were filed as transitions, points at which perception caught up with reality. The phrase circulated slowly at first, then solidified across star charts, political papers, and cultural broadcasts. They've stopped hiding. It wasn't spoken with dread. It was uttered with understanding. Because humans hadn't revealed a thirst for conquest. They had revealed preparedness, precision, capacity contained not by weakness but by will. There was no arrogance in how they moved forward. Only purpose. Former enemies began to reconsider ancient grudges. Cold disputes thawed. In some cases, apologies were issued for wars long since buried, not because humanity demanded them, but because the apology was now owed. Generations of suspicion collapsed under the clarity of proven restraint. Even the secretive Thaln Council, known for maintaining strict independence, issued an unprecedented statement praising Terran discipline born of power. That language was deliberate. It signaled acknowledgement, not alliance, but it was the closest thing to respect the Thaln had ever offered another species. The shift reached even those beyond formal politics. Civilians across disparate systems began studying Terran languages, culture, history. Not out of fascination, but reverence, the kind of reverence once reserved for ancient stars or sacred ruins. Because what humanity had shown wasn't just strength, it was identity. A species that remembered every wound, trained through every weakness, and rose not by conquering others, but by mastering themselves. Trade surged. Recruitment programs invited Terran advisors to assist in everything from logistics to planetary defense. Cultural exchanges exploded. No longer treated as quaint, Terran philosophy was now studied alongside traditional teachings. Phrases like strategic patience, controlled descent, and voluntary dominance became academic terminology. They hadn't claimed the center. They had become the gravity. And those who tried to resist that pull did so in isolation, watched closely, measured quietly, never harassed, but never forgotten. In time, a quote began circulating, origin unknown, speaker unnamed. It appeared in political manifestos, poems, strategic briefings, and even children's fiction. Asterisk, they were never trying to fit in. They were waiting to be seen. Asterisk, it echoed across generations. Not as warning, not as prophecy, as truth.